Hey guys, Virgin Vinyl with you again today. So, what have we got today? We've got Thelonious Monk with John Coltrane, an absolute classic of classics, an album that was that saw like two of jazz's giants, come together for a short period of time, and was thankfully captured. Basically, it's like the first side of this. What does it say? One historic teaming so Thelonious Monk and John Coltrane at New York's Five Spot Cafe, beginning in the summer of 1957. So there's like a few tracks which are taken from that, and then there's like most of side one is that, and then side two is like some other stuff taken from some other Thelonious Monk albums, like alternate takes and stuff like that, but also fantastic. So why did I decide to pick this one up? Well, I had this when I was a kid. When I discovered jazz, it was actually through Fishbone. So I was a big Fishbone fan when I was a teenager, and there was something about the sound of the horns, the trumpets, the trumpet in particular, and there's something about that sound that really drew me in. And so I went down to my music shop that actually I don't think it wasn't a local music shop. I went into the city. It was actually HMV, I think, which was like a big record chain back in the day. And I went into the jazz department, and I asked the guy, like, so, I don't know anything about jazz, but who's the best, what's the best album to get for a beginner, and like something with trumpet. And of course he gave me Kind of Blue by Miles Davis. And of course, that album blew my mind. I remember coming home that day and putting it on my mum's incredible sound system, and it was I can't remember, it was a weekend, Saturday or Sunday afternoon. I think it was a Sunday afternoon, just quiet. There was nobody home. It was just me, my mum's killer sound system that she had, and when so when that started, I was like, and then like when Miles started his solo, I was just like, holy shit, this is like, what is this music? And it totally captivated me, and it began a whole shift in the way I saw music. And it changed my buying habits too, because all of a sudden I was like, holy shit, I need to buy a lot of jazz. And I bought a shitload of jazz. In fact, probably the bulk of my huge CD collection over the years was jazz. Anyway, I picked this one up pretty soon after that, I would say, like probably, I went crazy. At the time, I started working at the casino, and I was making good money, and I was still living at home. So I had plenty of expendable money, so I was buying a lot of CDs back then. Anyway, so like, I don't know how, like, once I'd bought all the Miles stuff, then I started with like his sidemen, and I got like some Coltrane stuff, and I got some, Cannonball and Bill Evans, and all that sort of shit. And then into the fusion stuff, and that's a whole nother story. But the one that I always like had a bit of a struggle with, I think, was John Coltrane. I could never really understand why people were putting Coltrane on the level that they were putting him on. Because I think, like, when I was like searching for jazz, I wanted there was a specific sound that I was looking for. I think that goes for every genre of music that I was really into when I was younger. There were these specific sets of sounds that I wanted to hear, and from specific instruments, and So like it meant that I think I just overlooked a lot of greatness. And thankfully, as I've matured over the years, and especially in recent years, I've really been able to go back and reevaluate a lot of music that I knew deep down it was good, it just didn't touch me, and really rediscover it and finally understand what the hell is going on here and why is it so great. And so I have to say that like really recently something's just clicked for me with John Coltrane, and I fucking get it, and I'm like, oh, what was I thinking? But you know what I think it is that an interesting gateway is, I think for me, Alan Holdsworth, because I always loved Alan Holdsworth's playing as a sideman in the 70s, like for most of my years growing up, like all the Soft Machine and Gong and with Jean-Luc Ponty and all of that stuff, right? But I never really could get his solo albums. They like it just didn't click. I knew it was good, but I just didn't understand it. It didn't do anything for me until like reasonably recently. I started to understand it, and then once it clicked, I love that shit way more now, way more than I love the stuff he does as a sideman. Better than all of it, Like I adore those Alan Holdsworth albums now. They've become like my favorite albums, and Alan has raced up to be my equal favorite guitarist with John McLaughlin. Both those guys, both of them, were heavily influenced by John Coltrane. Not in the way, not by copying his licks or anything like that, but more like conceptually, John was always pushing the boundaries of his instrument and pushing the boundaries of like pushing the rules, like seeing like where things could go, and doing it in like operating that within the framework of an expert musician, like just a master of his instrument. He has a completely unique tone on the saxophone. This is something that I'm also getting better at distinguishing. When I was younger, I wasn't a big saxophone fan, even though I had like thousands of saxophone albums. But again, like I said, that wasn't the sound I was really looking for. And there was other saxophonists that I preferred. I preferred Cannonball back in the day when I was young. Even though like I had all those albums, I just didn't get it. I remember like listening to A Love Supreme by John Coltrane, and I'm embarrassed to say, like I just didn't get it. It was just like, I thought it sounded like shit. Man, that's hard to admit, but it's true. Anyway, I was listening to it again. Just recently, just the other day, and I was like, holy shit, it's fucking amazing. It's fucking amazing. It's maybe one of the greatest jazz albums ever recorded. How the fuck did I not hear that before? I don't know. I felt really stupid, but this is the way it goes with music sometimes. And this is the thing for me that, like, at least I can say this about myself, is that, I've always, even when something like hasn't necessarily grabbed me, I've always been able to tell if there's something there that I should come back to this. I should spend some time with it and let it evolve and get an understanding of what's going on here, because there's probably like, it's probably going to pay off big time, and you're probably going to, all of a sudden you're going to understand that this is one of the greatest things you've ever heard. And that's kind of how I'm feeling about John Coltrane at the moment. It's so funny because I bought all those albums, and because I was just like so hungry for jazz, and I was like so obsessed with it. But the sound that I was searching for when I was buying a lot of those albums was something, I had this very narrow thing that was set up by Kind of Blue and by Miles. And even on all of Miles's other albums, he never had that tone again, not like that. And now, of course, there's a whole bunch of Miles albums that I prefer, and you know, I'm much more of a fusion guy in general, like a jazz rock guy, really. But you know, I still love all this sort of classic stuff. Like probably my favorite Miles Davis album is Milestones, actually, because especially now, because I now when I listen to it, I'm like, holy shit, Coltrane is incredible on that album as well, and Miles is incredible. Like Miles is always sort of not given the credit for being the virtuoso player that he was. He's given the credit for being this sort of conceptual genius and a genius of a band leader and all of this sort of stuff, and being a visionary. But you know, it's quite often people sort of poo-poo his actual virtuosity on the instrument. But just have a listen to Milestones. I mean, that album is incredible. Well, anyway, I saw this in the record shop and I thought, well, Thelonious Monk, he is, you know, one of the genius songwriters of jazz, and you know, one of the genius piano players as well. And I don't have as much to say about him because I don't know his music as well. I didn't spend that much time with it. I spent more time with other pianists like Bill Evans. But what I do know of him is genius, and that's undebatable. But for me, the draw of this album was Coltrane, and how Coltrane like works within the environment of Thelonious Monk's compositions, and it's absolutely beautiful stuff. My only gripe with this album is that there's not enough of John on here. There are some tracks where he's not playing on it. There's some tracks where there's Coleman Hawkins and Gigi Grace and Ray Copeland on trumpet. So this, like, there's a bit of you know, this album does leave you a little bit frustrated because, like for me, because the reason I got it is for Coltrane. But when he's on it, it's brilliant, you know, and you can see that sort of those early sheets of sound, that development, and you know, just incredible. Like at that young age, the way he conceptualized music, you know, those guys were such geniuses. And of course, Coltrane would go on to, you know, record some of the absolute giant albums of, you know, the 60s, like Giant Steps and My Funny Valentine. Blue Train obviously is around, I think it's around the same time as this. Of course, I love Supreme. There's a whole bunch of them. Crescent. They're really all Soul Train. Soul Train's really good as well. Everything, like, it's so funny because, you know, I was so dismissive of Coltrane all those years. I was like, why is everybody going on about him? I don't like his tone. He's got this sort of, like, harsh kind of tone. Like, especially when you listen to him compared to like someone like Cannonball Adderley, who has this really smooth and beautiful tone and is equally as expressive, but it's sort of a little bit more harkening back to the bebop guys in the way he phrases things. Whereas Coltrane he's more harsh, he's more like, you know, coming at you with these waves, these sheets of sound, you know, like that description is pretty apt. Actually, the guy who wrote the blurb on the back of this, Ira Gittler, is the guy who came up with that description. And I think it's pretty apt, you know. It's like these sort of endless explosions, like these sort of like fireworks, you know, they just come at you, you know, these waves of notes, and you know, just taking you in these really interesting directions. And it just gets more and more and more deep as you go further along into Coltrane's, you know, short but profound discography. It's such a shame that he died young, you know. It would have been really interesting to see what he would have done going forward with his life, because the guy was an absolute genius. And I'm so glad that that I've been able to go back and listen to him and get it like the way I got Holdsworth. And I think it's thanks to listening to Alan Holdsworth and his music and getting past that sort of mental block or something like that of like when I was listening to Holdsworth's solo albums, I was wanting to hear the sound that he had with Tony Williams' Lifetime or Soft Machine or something like that. And so I was like disappointed that that's not the sound that you get, that's not the approach that you get on those albums, right? So it was like kind of like frustrating, and that's why. But then when I came back to it in recent times without those expectations, you know, just wanting to like try and hear it again on its own merits, I was absolutely blown away. And that's kind of the same thing that's happened here. Like going through that with him made me reevaluate John Coltrane as well. And lately he's just blowing my mind. Just an absolute genius. And of course, you know, anybody who knows jazz doesn't need me to convince them of that. You're all probably just going like, what a fucking idiot that it took you this long to understand that. But there you go, you know. I always understood that he was a great player and that he you know, obviously he knew his shit. It just didn't click with me or something. Like it just, I was like, I don't know, there was guys that I just thought sounded better, you know? Not better technically, but just better like aesthetically maybe. But I'm glad I've finally gotten over that shit, because this is incredible. I'm really happy to have got my hands on this. Hopefully I can get my hands on A Love Supreme, because I think that's really his masterpiece. It's such an incredible album, such a like unique experience, you know. And like a lot of my heroes have drawn from it, like John McLaughlin. You can hear it, you know. So yeah, I want to say, sorry, John, I fucking overlooked you all these years, but don't worry, I'm a fan of yours now, so thank you. And just a little side thing, it was interesting, I didn't even know it was going to be like that, but the vinyl came in that color. So it's funny, I've noticed like a lot of jazz represses sort of seem to come on these colored vinyls, but they're always just like they're not like a splatter vinyl or you know, marbled vinyl or anything like that. It's usually just this one color sort of shit. So I don't know why they do that, but anyway, there you go. All right, guys, that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and hit the like and subscribe if you like what I'm doing here. See you tomorrow.